And I want to thank those of you who have turned in your pledge cards. You know I couldn't get this service over with without mentioning that. Do appreciate it. And for those of you who have yet to turn in your pledges, thank you for prayerfully considering that as we look to the next year and what God can do through us as we give our support. Another quick word about your favorite subject, masks. Been getting some question about our mask policy here at the church. Well, the good news is, as many of you know, the numbers are going in the right direction in our area. As many of you know as well, the vaccine has been approved for children ages 5 and up, so we believe we're turning a corner. So the good news is that your task force here at the church, the COVID task force, which has been making very wise decisions in the midst of this time, will gather together soon, November 15th, and make the decision, hopefully at that time, to go mask optional. So wanted to let you know that it's on the horizon, and we are working through that. Yes, there you go. Let us be in an attitude of prayer together. Eternal God, we do thank you for the gift of this worship service and the music and the prayers. It stirs us so. We're very much aware that your Spirit is with us, Lord. And now, Lord, you've given me the amazing privilege and responsibility of preaching your word to these my friends and your servants. Lord, a task I honestly need your strength in order to do. So, Lord, speak to me and through me in such a way that all of us do receive a word from you that will make a difference to our lives. It's in Christ's name we pray. Amen. I want to read a passage of Scripture for you today. It actually comes from the assigned reading for today, the Revised Common Lectionary. For those of you uninitiated, there are assigned readings for each Sunday of the year. Sometimes I follow them, sometimes I don't. But today there is a text that fits real well with our season. It comes from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 12, and I'll be reading verses 41 through 44. It's a familiar text to some of you. He sat down opposite the treasury and watched the crowd putting money into the treasury. Many rich people put in large sums. A poor widow came and put in 2 small copper coins, which are worth a penny. Then he called his disciples and said to them, "Truly I tell you, this poor widow has put in more than all those who are contributing to the treasury. For all of them have contributed out of their abundance, but she, out of her poverty, has put in everything she had, all she had to live on." May the Lord add his blessing upon this reading of his holy word. Help us to hear it, understand it, believe it, and then live in response to it. This morning, church, I'm going to let you in on a little trade secret. Actually, it's a bit more of a confession. Most preachers salivate over this text. It gives us all the license we need to fleece the sheep. I know you've heard sermons before on it. You see this woman, she gave till it hurt. So give till it hurts. Be like her. When you give, do you really sacrifice? You know, the gift that counts is the gift that costs. So pony up, people. We're going to lock the doors. We're going to pass the plate again until all your pockets are empty. Then we'll know if you have genuine faith. I'm not opposed to preaching that kind of message today. I kind of like it. You can really shuck the corn with it. But the problem is, I don't think this widow would be a fan of that kind of interpretation. The text doesn't give us any indication that she was even aware that Jesus or anybody else was watching her give money, that penny, to the treasury. She wasn't there to be recognized. She wasn't trying to give some great demonstration of faith. In fact, I believe she would be appalled that we're mentioning her 2,000 years later and her penny. It was just another day, ordinary day, to go to the temple. She had it rough. You know, the widows had it hard back in those days. They were very poor, had no rights, had to scrape to survive, and the only place that was comforting for her, the only place she could find strength and encouragement was the temple. She wasn't out for any award. In fact, I don't think it ever occurred to her that she was making much of a sacrifice. What she did was the right thing. She thought she wanted to do it. So even though many of us find it hard to believe, there are some people who are actually that committed. I recently read about a minister out in North Dakota who was preaching his sermon. And lo and behold, in the middle of the sermon, there was a lady by the name of Mary sitting in her pew who fainted, hit her head against the side of the pew. Well, there was an EMT who quickly went to her and tended to her and called an ambulance. The ambulance got there, they put her on the stretcher, they strapped her to the stretcher, and as they were wheeling out of the church, she regained consciousness, and she waved for her daughter to come towards her. Everyone thought she was going to give her last words right there in the church. And the daughter got closer to her lips, and the lady whispered, "The offering's in my purse." Now that's commitment, right? That's commitment. The kind of commitment we find in our text for today. The text said, and she gave all she had. Sometimes it's hard for us to believe that people would be that committed. But the church could do with more committed people like that, amen? You know, people who want to give regardless of what they get back, who give despite what they're going to get back. They're just able and willing. They'll do whatever you ask them to do, day or night. They're always there for the cause of Christ, for the cause of the church. Oh, you can never have enough people like that. They're always a premium. And I'll tell you another secret too. When preachers often get together in meetings, we love to commiserate about, we wish we had more committed people. You should hear us whine. If only we had more committed people, we could really do something. If only we had more committed people, we'd never have to throw a stewardship campaign again. If only we had more committed people, oh my gosh, we wouldn't burn so many people out. You know so-and-so in that office, she's there every week. I could have 50 of her. Oh my gosh, that would be heaven. Nobody can whine and complain like a bunch of preachers, I tell you. I admit it, I confess. Where is everybody? I hope everybody comes back after COVID. I really do. Well, and I know I'm preaching to the choir. I know I'm looking out among many committed people who are thinking, yes, sick 'em, Charlie. Sick 'em, sick 'em, sick 'em. I get it. I know. So the question is, how do you make more people committed? Well, if I knew the answer to that, I'd be the greatest church growth guru in the world. And this would be the greatest church in all of Christendom. Yet we still ask the hard question, don't we? How do you make more people committed? We want more. We want more pledges, more giving, more work, more volunteers, more. But there's some bad news if you listen to some people. If you read all the journals and magazines and articles that pastors are supposed to read to keep up on all the church trends, all the experts say the same thing right now. They say this, that COVID has sucked the commitment out of so many church people. They say they're not going to come back. They won't come back. They've developed new habits. They watch church online. They're just not going to come back. Do you believe that? I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure. Well, maybe instead of just whining about it and worrying about it, we ought to do something about it, amen? Be more proactive. Get a strategy going to get more people committed. And maybe part of that is to be reasonable. I mean, lower your expectations for the love of Pete. You know, I mean, we could do with just half committed people, right? I mean, in the text, Jesus talks about those rich, distinguished folks who, yes, gave out of their abundance, but they gave, right? They gave, they showed up, they gave. Both settled for that. And why did they give? Why did they show up? Well, in the preceding verses of our text, it seems to suggest that they gave, they showed up because they got the best seats in the synagogue. Maybe that's it. Maybe that's it. You know, I've heard over the years about certain churches and temples where you can buy your favorite seat in the church. Maybe that's the answer. You know, if you give the most money, they'll put a name, a plaque on your favorite pew right there, and you can always sit there. Maybe that's the answer. Do you think that would work? You know, all the people with perfect attendance would sit there. Yeah. And people who had the best hours of volunteerism in the church would sit there. And those who gave the most money would sit there. I mean, people need to feel valued, right? I mean, we know people want to be appreciated. Think that would work? I don't know. Maybe we need to think bigger, be more creative. I heard about a church, and this is true. As Bill Self used to say, everything I tell you is true, but this is truer than some of the things I've told you. This is true. A church had a plan. In order to get more people in the church and more commitment and more attendance, they decided they had a plan, and I don't know if they carried it through, but you have to give them credit. They decided, or they planned, to build a huge roller coaster right next to the sanctuary. They had that kind of budget. There was that big of a church. This huge roller coaster. You could see it right outside the sanctuary. And you could ride it as long as you had a ticket, they planned. And the only way you could get a ticket is if you went to worship and showed up for 2 hours on Sunday, or you volunteered 2 hours during the week. They even had a contest to name the roller coaster. Can you imagine? The Great Redeemer. Armageddon, the Rapture. Think that would work? I don't know. Maybe the best strategy is to use the oldest trick in the book, just to guilt people into being committed. We're good with that in the South, aren't we? Just lay it on thick. Just guilt people into doing it. I know some of you have heard sermons like that. A colleague not too long ago sent me a YouTube link of a real church and a real preacher getting up in the pulpit and actually calling people out by name right there in the service. Mary, John, I haven't seen you in a while. Where you been? Get your act together. And Pete back there, I know what you're doing. I know what you're doing in school. Get right with God. Can you imagine? I heard the pastor didn't last long after that. I heard a sermon once on this text. The widow's mite. Oh, preachers love this text. It wasn't a bad sermon. The guy was hammering home the idea of putting God first with this widow. See, she put God first. She put God first. And he told this story about some guy going to a financial planner who was this great Christian. And he drew a box on a piece of paper and said, you know, this is your life. And then he drew outside the box a dollar sign and a cross. And he said, listen, I need to know which one of these you want to put in the center of your life, because I can't plan your finances, I can't plan your life unless you tell me which one to pick. You see, that's what the widow did. She gave all she had. She made God a priority. Is God a priority in your life? That's not bad. That's not a bad sermon. But you know what I've discovered over the years as a preacher? That kind of message is not as effective as I once thought it was. Because people know they should put God first, for goodness sake. People know what their priorities should be. Everybody knows what they should do, but doing the should and knowing the should are two different things. So, you know, I don't think sermons like that are very effective. Because here's the truth. Here's the honest to goodness truth. You can't make people be more committed. They're either committed or they're not. I mean, I could preach the candles down and give you every homiletical strategy I know. At the end of the day, people are going to commit or they're not going to commit because people need to have ears to hear. I mean, I could bring in the Atlanta Braves in here, get a big crowd, have Dansby Swanson get up and give his testimony and go around with a clipboard signing people up for things. But I've found commitment in those kinds of events really doesn't last long. People either commit or they don't. The question that we need to ask ourselves today is, why are committed people so committed? Why? Ever thought about that? Ever wondered why that widow gave everything she had that day? Why she was so committed? I mean, I don't know. I'm sure it wasn't, well, that rabbi keeps calling, keeps sending letters. I want to shut him up. I'm going to give. I'm sure it wasn't that. You know, like the mom who gets up in the middle of the night with her crying baby. I'm sure she doesn't think, you know, when I left that hospital, I promised the doctor I would make feeding my baby a priority. No. Or that loving man, loving husband who looks after his wife stricken with cancer, night and day and day and night and night and day and day and night. You think he's thinking, well, I signed that marriage license 50 years ago. I guess it's still binding. Or that group of friends who show up to the funeral of their friend to support the family. You think they're thinking, well, when she took us out to dinner the last time, she did pay. No. I think it goes deeper than that, don't you think? Well, today is All Saints' Day. As was mentioned before, when we remember all those wonderful people in the history of the church and the history of this church, loved ones in our family who have outrun us to the Father's house, and their witness, their inspiration. It's a good practice. I remember a saint in one of the churches I served in Florida. His name was Sam. Oh my gosh, Sam, he was always there, volunteering, serving in the church so much he needed an office. You know people like that? Always there. And one of the things he always used to do was mow our lawn. And you know, in Florida, with that summer heat and the rain, oh my gosh, that grass, it grew like crazy. So he was always there mowing the lawn, and mowing the lawn. That's Sam. Well, one day we found out he got cancer. Going through chemo, making him weak. And I'm in my office one day, and I look out the window, and there's Sam mowing the gosh darn lawn. And he came in to get some water, looked white as a sheet. I said, Sam, what are you doing? Go home, okay? We can get somebody else to do this. You're weak, go home. No, that's okay, I'll do it. Sam, what are you doing? Go home. I kept pressing him until he got irritated. And he looked at me and said this, Charlie, you know, you're not the only one who cares about the church. Can't you accept that I care about this church? I'm sorry, Sam, if it means that much to you. He said, well, it does mean that much to me. Pastor, you don't know this, but long before you came to this church, we joined this church. Well, my wife joined this church. I didn't want to join because I was a drunk and a cheat. My life unraveled, and this church didn't judge me. This church saved me, saved my marriage, saved my life. Does that answer your question? Is it really so hard for us to believe that people can be that committed, can care that much? Yeah, it had been a long week here recently. I was tired, a little bit discouraged. In walks this young humble man into my office holding one of my sermon manuscripts. And I thought, do people really read those? It reminded me I was way behind in getting those out. I still am. Do people really read those? All that editing, all that stuff, getting it out. Sat in my office. He handed me that manuscript, and it looked well used, like many people had held it and read it. It was entitled, Keep the Faith. He looked at me, said, you don't know me, but I want to tell you that sermon saved my life. I said, what? Said, yeah, I was in prison for a long time. It was hard. And I finally found out I was going to be released. Going to see the parole board, was going to be released. It was pretty much promised to me. Well, some kind of glitch, some kind of political issue, and I was never released. And I went back to my dark cell, he said, and I cried. He said it was a lockdown at that time, gang violence. Every cell door was locked, and I was weeping. And I was thinking to myself, you know what? I'm just going to take all the drugs I can find in this prison. I'm going to join a gang. What's the point? And then there was a knock on his cell door, and the guard opened it. And he said they never opened the door during a lockdown. Said, hey, you got some mail. At that moment, I opened up that envelope, and it was that sermon my grandmother sent me. I read it. And I decided right there I would keep the faith. And I did. And I'm here. So I want you to know that sermon saved my life. Do people ever read that? You know, I need experiences like that. I don't know about you. Because I get jaded. I get cynical. It's one of the worst hazards of this profession, of this vocation. You do it long enough, you think, well, people really don't care. They're only going to commit if they get something in return. And then these saints show up and say, not so fast. People do care. People do commit. And I know many of you have your same experiences, don't you? Your same stories that jolt you back and remind you why all this fuss. Maybe it's a loved one who inspired you. Maybe it's something that you did that actually made a difference to somebody else. You know, I think that's the secret to committed people. It's not that they're holier than us or better than us or have more faith or know more Bible. It's that they have the audacity to believe that this makes a difference, that what we do matters. They have the audacity to care. And I think if that widow was here today, she'd say that to us. I don't know why you're making all this fuss. I lived 2,000 years ago and I gave a penny. I'm not better than you. I don't have more faith than you. I'm not more righteous than you. I just seem to believe that what I give makes a difference. Do you believe that? I mean, really, do you believe that? Do you care enough to believe, do we care enough to believe that what we do here as a church matters? You know what I've found, what I've learned? The people who actually believe that will give all they can, and they won't think twice about it. Some people would call that commitment. Let's pray. Eternal God, O love that will not let us go, we rest our weary souls in Thee. O Lord, draw us back close to Your heart today. Remind us, Lord, what matters. Dig through our hearts and remind us, Lord, that at the end of the day, we do care. We just forget sometimes. It's in Christ's name we pray. Amen.